Hi, and welcome everybody. This week on Network AF, I'm talking to my friend, former collaborator, and former boss, Jordan Lowe. Jordan runs a company called Deft, and we're talking about what's fun and frustrating in networking nowadays. Jordan, could you give a little bit of a brief intro?
Yeah, thank you, Avi, for having me. I'm excited to join you on here. So as you mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of Deft, which was previously known as ServerCentral. Before that, I was working with a company called NLayer, which got acquired by what is now GTT, which is a lot of the networking stuff we'll be talking about today, I'm sure. But that's it. I was with ServerCentral. We've, as we rebranded to Deft now, it's been just over 22 years now. So I've been mostly doing the same thing for quite a while. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, it's a little different every year over year, both on the tech and business side. Where did ServerCentral start?
Oh, that's a great question. It started in the dorm room. I mean, truthfully, it's one of those stories that somehow ended in success. we started with an old courier modem at my college apartment. I still remember updating the firmware on that thing to v.x.fast or whatever the latest. Yeah. Whatever the latest thing is to get that extra 2 or 3K off the dial-up speed. But 22 later, here we are.
And you're also doing DNS and things like that, overlay service?
So when the company started, we were doing hosting. We were one of the first people to kind of combine domain names and web hosting into one plan. So we're basically giving away domain names, which was unheard of at the time. This is back when Network Solutions was charging $35 a year for a domain name. And we started bundling it in with a $5 or $10 a month hosting account. People didn't believe it was true. But that ended, pretty well. A lot of people, we got thousands and thousands of customers there, and that's kind of what kicked us off into what we are today. We kind of wrapped that business up and sold it off in I think 2008 or 2009. But that's that base of customers and that experience is what kind of got us where we are today.
Cool. So you benefited from another of my guests and friends, Elliot Noss and OpenSRS and Tucals and what they were up to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So you've been running networking for quite some time. I won't ask you what year you first got Enable. I think, for me, it was way too early. It was actually in college, late 80s, and I tried not to do too much damage. But things are different, but things are the same. I mean, what's exciting about running a network? What's cool about running a network nowadays?
Lots of stuff. I was just thinking back to when I got, when I first started playing, actually.
What was that?
I was thinking, it was a little bit earlier. I mean, I was, I think my first computer was like a Lisa, which would have been, would have been the late 80s.
Or running Lisa?
I think it was probably Lisa 2, because I'm a little younger than you. It was probably like 88, 89. So that would have been the end of the...
The first time I used a Lisa, I demoed a Lisa using Lisa. The first time I used a Lisa was when they made a Mac clone so they could run like Mac OS.
I still remember that. There was like a phone cord connecting the mouse. It was that's pretty classic. Yeah. Then I got like a Mac LC, I think, in the early 90s, my first real computer. And we all remember the first modem, the first, I guess it wasn't really my first business at ServerCentral when we started that. It was actually, I guess I ran a BBS for a little bit way back in the day. I remember having a couple phone lines into my parents' house.
Yeah.
I mean, that was some classic.
I always
stuff
wanted to do that at home. That was how I got into the ISP side, because I had pent up frustration from not running a multi-line BBS, but we weren't into it. My parents weren't into it. So when I was growing up.
That is funny. Sorry, I apologize. You're asking about what challenges networking has today, or what?
Or let's start on the positive side. I mean, for me, it's just like I plugged in 100 gig connections, and I was expecting that the heavens to part or there to be tons of problems. And instead it was just like, choop, choop, link up, I was like, wow, that was pretty anticlimactic. I mean, it's some ways it's pretty cool what's going on with networking today. So I thought
it's awesome. Yeah. I mean, I guess I'll open up with us, with us being old, like when we started, things were a lot different, right? Like, to get a T1 or a DS3 was a huge deal. It was very complicated, and it, wasn't that fast, even back then. But I mean, having 100 gig stuff just work today. I mean, 400 gig is, there's plenty of carriers out there that you can get 400 gig ports today, which is which is crazy. And it does just work now. It's a lot, stuff, what's the nice thing over time is stuff isn't as complicated. It does generally just work, which has taken a lot of pain and a lot of, I'm sure bugs, multiple people, including us, have found over the years to keep this stuff working a little bit better. But it is pretty nice. I will say things are much easier when it comes to, adding capacity and just general things at the moment. It's, makes a lot of things like DDoS less painful. You don't have to worry as much about the stuff as you did back then when anybody could kind of take you out. Now it takes a little bit more energy than it did before. Slightly a little bit more energy to throw more than a couple hundred gigs around.
Who was I talking with last week? We were talking about the trick that people used to do who had IRC servers of like buying a connection from someone you hated and single homing, to IP space from them, your IRC server, so that they would get the attacks instead of you. So it was like early DDoS defense.
Yeah, I mean that's actually one of the things that kind of trained us and keeps us on our toes. We've had an IRC server the entire time basically.
Oh wow!
So we still run it. It is still up, and it obviously these days doesn't get too many attacks anymore, as IRC isn't too exciting after things like Slack kind of copied and
maybe we should show IRC to Elon Musk. Maybe he wants to, bring back IRC and Usenet, for decentralized future glories.
It would work. Still out there.
I mean, it is, and still decentralized. So, what about automation? There's a lot of hype about it, but I was talking to some folks that are customers of yours, and they said that it's a big part of doing the design and getting automation and having stuff up. How does that differ from 20 years ago when you turn someone up with a mannet that has multiple switches and routers and servers and stuff?
Oh yeah, I mean it's changed pretty wildly. I mean, back in the day, the best you could do was some scripts. But then a lot of the router vendors, we've always been preferential with Juniper. Juniper allowed us to have a little more flexibility in the early days and kind of load more of the customer side config into the router as a template. So we were able to kind of make it a lot easier to turn customers up, not having to repeat 17 commands every time you're adding a new BGP neighbor. But I mean, these days it's a completely different world. It's all in what would be like an Ansible setup or these Python scripts that really allow us to really do a much more modern job and really not have to log on to switches at all. Not saying it doesn't have its own kind of drawbacks and problems. The generation of people that are used to being on those routers and checking things and the process they do is a little bit different than what it is today. So it is easy to miss a couple things. We've definitely had our own challenges as well. With the automated side, you might not be monitoring the same type of stuff that you were before. So the same kind of things that would kick off a CLI error, you can write that a CLI error happen. It might not actually work, and then you don't know about it. So obviously, every time we make a change like that, and we learn and script around, script it and check it and add an error condition. It's programming.
One of the big challenges is, like I remember when I was trying to use Brocade for the first time, and I was cutting and pasting because it was so close to Cisco, and like they had a thing where every time you made a change, it would say like, yes, I made a change. So I didn't notice that it wasn't actually taking the route maps. And then I turned on BGP with no route maps and became make clueless because, so whether it's CLI or, when you try to automate and do things too fast, and then, hopefully the vendors don't change, API response codes. And like we have this as SaaS company, we have the same challenge, right? Which is people build to your APIs. That becomes a promise, and in the router world, CLI is a promise, API is a promise. We could move to API if people would just make everything only available or available via API also. And some vendors do better at that, than others.
Yeah, but I mean, realistically, all of our new deployments, have all been completely automated, and it's a very different way to work. And it's go ahead.
So, are you at the point where, for I know this one deployment wasn't cookie cutter, but for a reasonable deployment that you're really just getting in via CLI, either to bootstrap, an IP address or to just check that it feels right at the end?
Yep. Yeah, generally, and if even that. So again, that's only the newest stuff. I mean, a lot of our, I'll say legacy equipment, but it's still a lot of our older stuff is not obviously up to that spec yet. Our team is working really hard to get there, and they're doing an awesome job. But I mean, we have, being around for 22 years gives us a lot of, what we'd call cruft. We have, lots of devices, lots of things that do not, perfectly aligned with everything else. So, can't really automate everything yet, but we're working hard, as hard as we can to get all the kind of standard stuff moved off and into databases and where we can, really have it all automated. It's great, the idea for us, obviously, allow customers to do a lot more. We've always had a couple fun things customers could do that were, groundbreaking when we did it, letting customers add their own null routes or add their own firewall rules. That was cool 10 years ago, but now it's just kind of expected to be able to do stuff like that. But realistically, a lot of people have not been exposed to this stuff. I mean, even our customers seeing your product, seeing Kentic, for example, it's life-changing. We have customers every time, we show it in our portal demos. It's not something a lot of people offer. It's super appreciated. It gives them insights and something that they never think about. And it's actually, it's a huge win for something that, we've obviously coded that when you started the company years ago. People love it. And, little stuff that makes a difference.
We have to talk through it with some companies because they're like, wait, but if the customer can see why their links are full, then maybe they won't buy as much. It's like, well, but maybe they'll just be happier and buy more from you. So sort of like the old QoS discussions. If we rate limit that, sell them as much as we can and hope they use none of it. And that's how we're going to make money. It's just very different from the modern business philosophy of, let me make this customer like super enthused and they will go somewhere else and bring us in and they will tell their friends and they will adopt it widely. It's sort of doing well by doing good, but, brought to the business side, which is pretty cool to see.
Yeah, definitely. It's been fun. I mean, network stuff is definitely close to my heart, and I love playing with it. I love getting the latest stuff out there, and it's a very gentle kind of prodding we have to do to move stuff along because most of our customers don't want to take an outage to kind of shift platforms or shift deployments because it doesn't change anything for them in the end. Like they're not really getting a big win. We're getting a win, obviously. But, we have to say, hey, this is long-term. This is for stability. This is to get you on the latest everything. And
well, you do make sure the greenfield stuff, the new deployments, are run that way. Yeah. It is, I really would, like when I was learning TCP IP, there was still a question in the late 80s about the ISO protocols. And I think I don't know if there's anything left, but from ISO-LAN in sort of modern networking, but I really, in the late 80s, again, early 90s, would have thought that by now, the way the internet would be built would be different. And instead, we have IPv6, but we also have IPv4. We have BGP version 4. We have, we still have RIP v2 up through. And so that's a testament. That's really awesome, especially as someone that doesn't enjoy doing the, endless protocol meetings and RFC type stuff. I'm thrilled that there's people that love IETF. It's just not for me with my ADD. No, I mean, that's pretty cool when I look and see, well, we're communicating over Zoom and the internet is mostly working. And so it's sort of a mystery to me that it hasn't moved, but also pretty cool that it's been able to work, just going from, a megabit to a gigabit to pretty soon we'll have terabit interfaces. So,
I mean, it was pretty amazing when COVID started and everyone started doing Zoom and all the different meeting platforms, and it generally worked. Mm-hmm. Obviously, a lot of people running around crazy upgrading stuff, on the back of all the consumer networks, and I'm sure everyone at Comcast will tell you stories. All the networks are saying, "Oh, we had to do all this stuff and all these splits and all this stuff," but in the end, it got done. It worked. Zoom was able to spin up a ton of servers. They made a couple small. They did do some things to limit bandwidth, obviously initially, because they didn't. Nothing, that was a huge increase. They wanted to limit bandwidth for both their equipment, Amazon's equipment. I'm not going to say not their bills as well, but
right.
They kick some defaults down to 480p or whatever the lower bandwidth rate is, but they already had a pretty good platform there. They already did a good job of making all of the speakers' video spin up to full speed when they were speaking. Everyone else kind of slowed down to a lower bit rate, which is already existing, which is smart.
Across our customer base, just people had a bunch of over provisioning in place. So, that was really good. But so sounds like lifecycle automation is something that you guys have. That is really where we see most of our customers, working towards. And of course, if you can't see it, then that's not really helpful. We don't really have any customers doing the magic streaming telemetry, stream 400 gigabits of state from the thing and have magic ML, show you everything that's wrong. But there's a lot that you can do just with, device metrics and of course traffic and performance and all that. So what are the challenges of, running a network? It's much more efficient to run a network than it used to be, certainly per bit, but, what are the challenges?
Yeah, just off the bat, lately it's been hardware availability. That's kind of the big thing, both on the the DWDM and optical side, and top rack switches have been a bit of a challenge. We were lucky enough, our team did suggest we placed a lot of large orders for both network equipment and compute and storage right when this all happened. So that's all been kind of flowing in over the last year or two, which has been working pretty well. So we haven't had any kind of major issues, but we've definitely delayed a couple upgrades here and there. We definitely have a couple locations on our network that are a little bit behind. We have some sites running older routers than were planned. Nothing catastrophic, but hardware wise, it's that's been the biggest challenge really. But people has been a challenge. I'm lucky to have an awesome team working with. We have a bunch of really great guys, between the operations, automation, platform teams that all kind of, network side. It's really great. So, we've been lucky. We've got a great team. What else? The stability is obviously always a big challenge today. With using all of these kind of newer protocols we've talked about, like, the newer deployments are all like EVPN and, VXLAN, which are, while they're not that new, they're still new, versus things that are 20 years old. So they're not as stable as all, they're not as stable as the old stuff. Now that's a pretty small percentage of issues, but there's still more issues and bugs on the new stuff than there ever was before. So we've got to be very careful about testing, very careful about writing the right, versions of code, all the right stuff, because there are issues. There's still some interoperability issues. There's still, just a host of things that we've got to watch out for all the time. So it takes a lot of documentation, a lot of review, a lot of testing, especially on the stacks that run the latest and greatest stuff.
Which ties back to the people, right? Which is, I love it that networking is like, I hate it and I love it that networking is like physics, where you have to like know the first principles and be able to build in your head a model of what the thing is doing in an Einsteinian thought experiment to say, well, is this what it should be doing or is this a bug? Like sometimes just things break and sessions die, but sometimes like routes just don't get advertised. You're like, well, maybe I used it wrong, or maybe my script to automate it is wrong. It's not as bad as the 90s, is it? When like, you'd stick the FIDI card in and Sparks would spit out the hissy port, and you're like, how could they make the software do that? And it was all one operating system program loader in the old bad old Cisco days.
I was actually thinking back to my dorm room where we had local talk back with the modem. So I don't want to get caught up there, but we had those local talk things.
XNS, SNA, local talk, yes.
Yep. Yeah, and that was before. Then I went to, I just remember doing all this stuff over, what was the original coax, 10 base 2 or something, or what was the original coax networks?
After thick. So you weren't doing vampire taps and all that. It was just the net. It's just Ethernet, the net stuff.
That was anyway, but back to the networking challenges. Is you saying that we have a different, we've had a different experience than people coming up today. The kids, as we'd call them today, coming up to networking, they never got the chance to do any of that stuff. A lot of these guys have they've grown up writing network as code. They've grown up starting all playing with Amazon as their original platform. They didn't build the server, they didn't build the switch, they didn't program it, set the IPs, and get the serial console working with back in the day trying 14 different USB adapters like we've had to do over the last 10 years. But that's been a little bit of a challenge, just people learning the basics. When problems do happen, you need to kind of think back to how it does work. So that can always kind of be fun. Obviously, as I said, most of our guys are awesome and have some of that experience. But for the new guys, it's always fun to kind of get them in the lab and break something and learn how to fix it the first time. Mm-hmm. When it's not something that's running, a lot of people come into a running network.
So do you have a lab both for training and for testing new configs and software and all that? And is it virtual, physical, both?
Both. So we have both a physical lab for even from the DWDM side. We have like WDM labs with we have for testing and training for both our data center operations guys, the guys that are going to patch stuff so they can learn how to do loops and light level testing and cleaning fibers, things like that. And then that stuff goes all the way through the network labs where we have basically one of each type of router and switch that we deploy, if not multiple. And we can go ahead and stage code on there, run upgrades, and link it into the network. do traffic tests, stuff like that to make sure everything works properly. And that stuff is, as I mentioned, is more and more important because it's not, before you could kind of get away with just, doing a shotgun upgrade. These days, you got to be very sure everything's working correctly and test everything very carefully. It's just not
Hopefully
worth.
There's some gals among the guys, at Deft as well. But the early 90s, I think I still have some people that work for me who have trauma. We used to have a bat light in the office that would go off when I enabled. And, when I was coming to a pop, I would just pull the UPS, and make sure that it worked. Because if it was going to die, it would be faster if I was there, because we were very lean and, a very small org at the time. And so, things have definitely changed hugely in terms of how we think about that. And customers always on. So networking doesn't work. And even the cloud outages, most storage outages in cloud are really network code or configs, or, everything is sort of layered down. It's not like it isn't the same technology. It's just, weird and different names. So
scaling issues, deployment issues, or code upgrade issues that break 17 dependencies to make it all work. People learn hard lessons.
Yeah. Which do you see as more challenging? Taking someone that is cloud native in their thinking, so they're using peering and tunnels and things like that, but maybe not thinking about them as that, and then getting into networking and primitives and how to live in that hybrid world, or sort of the reverse, and taking people that have come up on networking and computers and storage and know that stuff, but don't know the names and the bugs and the APIs, and don't think program first or GitOps first. Which is more, what's your approach and which is more challenging?
I would say, most of our customers are not super technical. We've got a lot of awesome tech forward companies with, great staffs, but, a lot of our, I would say more enterprise customers or just normal customers are not, don't get into the weeds, right? They just expect it to work. And the downside of that is when it works perfectly for years and there is an issue, they're like, they get upset because they got away with not having redundancy, disaster recovery, things like that, where if you have a little blip or a little problem, the world is ending. So, luckily that doesn't happen very often. But, versus the technical customers, I think understand if there's issues or problems a lot more. And it's, we really enjoy talking to them. One of the best things we can do is, when our staff enjoys talking to our customers, when our guys can talk about and geek about stuff all the time and get into it and talk about challenges and issues and build new cool stuff. That's really fun for the staff too. So truthfully, a good mix of that stuff is the best. Like we have a, bunch of people that are just happy being stable and running. And then we have the fun customers we get to talk tech with and build all kinds of new solutions for.
So do you have different teams for sort of cloud networking migration versus network ops versus some of the automation and tools side, or,
we do.
Where can you converge and not?
So there's a couple different groups. What we separated out, I would say maybe a year or two ago, is kind of the projects and tooling team from the operations and support guys. So that way, before, it would be like the same guys would be kind of trying to do everything, take the support calls, work on the automation, test the next upgrade. The problem is, customer stuff always comes first and they'd get backlogged and we wouldn't get to all the fun projects. We wouldn't get to get everything tested and upgraded in time. So we separated all that out, which was a good strategy. Now we have kind of 3 different groups that kind of handle all those different items. And that way the automation guys and tech guys are focused on, new customer turnups, automation, going back and fixing stuff, making sure, for example, some of the automation requires all our port descriptions to be the same or exact, right? Stuff like that, going through devices that might have been, sitting there untouched for a long time other than software upgrades, just making sure everything's perfect, making sure it's all going to work. Think about all the little stuff and then, tuning all the monitoring. We've got all kinds of different groups for this stuff now, which helps us kind of get through everything a lot better versus just hoping, pushing someone to make time for it. Now it's just their job is to do that part.
Yeah, just to come back to it about automation, that does seem to be the real core that everyone needs to have, which is the life cycle when stuff is turned up, turned down. When we onboard, it's almost like we have customers that ask us if we can do PS, and we're looking for good partners there. When someone comes on board and, they've got they want to sort of automate monitoring to follow applications, and we can do that on the Kubernetes side or on the cloud side. But when you have a network full of interface descriptions that are wrong, that's definitely a heavy lift to get into, but it isn't always possible to just say, well, just redo it all, greenfield, and then figure it out. And
there's just thousands and thousands of tens of thousands of interfaces in our case, and we made mistakes. For example, like one of the easiest mistakes to make is one of those typos that means the customers might not get billed, for example, or the customer not get, alerting might not work, monitoring might not work right. Mm-hmm. So it takes a lot of energy and time to make sure that we put checks in for each of these changes to make sure that if there's a port up without a matching description, it does something like that. So all those kind of, side cases and corner cases that we catch, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And it's a big job.
So how many people is Deft right now?
130 something, I believe.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned you used to own NLayer. I was there for that. Yep. You sold NLayer, but you still do peering and run is it global or is it national? You're sort of peering in transit network,
Global, yeah.
So is that, or why do you do that? Why not just buy transit? What's your view on that? Is it automated? It's not a big deal. Is it for cost, performance, security, availability?
All of it. I mean, first of all, a lot of our customers, so the backbone portion allows us to do a lot of things. I mean, everything from like on the peering side, obviously peering with our big traffic. Big people who sell a lot of traffic, in the US, for example, like Comcast, so we have multiple 100 gigs with Comcast in each market. If there is an issue with Comcast in one market, or they have a router maintenance, or some sort of issue, having the backbone allows us to send that traffic to another city, kind of route around the issue, pull that traffic from Chicago at Ashburn, send it out in Ashburn, so everything kind of stays smooth for our customers. The other big part of it is disaster recovery and DR between the locations. Having a backbone allows us to move IP addresses around the network. Mm-hmm. So if we have a customer that's got an active setup, we can actually automatically move IPs between markets. So as part of for example, we normally do like quarterly DR tests with our customers. Mm-hmm. We can flip from active to passive and from Chicago to California, for example, and move the IPs across, which for some legacy people and for some systems is a little bit it's I don't want to say it's the most modern way of doing failover and application stuff, but it's a really good way for a lot of applications that are a little bit older to have just everything keeps running on the VMs, and you just point the public IPs change. Mm-hmm. The public IPs stay the same and just get moved across the market.
Right. Yeah.
So that's a fun thing, and also allows us to do MPLS networks, things like that for our customers. We have a lot of customers that we interconnect offices around the world. So they might have an office in London, an office in Ashburn, an office in Dallas, and we'll be able to link all those back to the same backbone. And us running our own backbone allows us to kind of fully control that. It's like control your own destiny stuff, where we see the backbone, we can tell if there's an issue or an outage. We can do the routing ourselves. We can do the quality control. Mm-hmm. To make sure stuff is scaled properly. Just allows us to see everything and makes any issues a lot faster to troubleshoot. Yeah. Versus trying to call into one of the carriers and wait on hold, and hopefully stuff gets fixed.
So, yeah, I use the word control there. To be able mm-hmm. To be able to control the packet destiny, I guess that we see that also, as a big thing. Is peering set up mostly automated now in your lifecycle stuff, or?
I'm not sure. Actually, that's a good question. I know we don't do a ton of public peering at the moment. It's okay. The peering world goes through kind of there's two parts of it, as you surely know, is both the price and the size of the ports on the peering exchanges. So our CashFly brand, the CDN side does peer in all the markets, obviously extensively, and we interconnect with them in some markets as well. Mm-hmm. But on the Deft side, we do peer in certain markets, but most of our peering is kind of private peering with like the Amazons or people like that. Obviously we're not supposed to talk about who we interconnect with, yeah. But most of our peering at the moment is private peering. We are on some of the exchanges, but it's one of those things where there's a couple business cases behind it, both the cost of the ports and the cost of transit. Depending on those two things, it kind of incents you to either do peering or not do peering. And right now in the cycle of things we're currently in, doesn't make a ton of sense to do a huge amount of peering right now. Traditionally, I would be on the other side of that, right? Like traditionally, the transit was more expensive and it was faster and better to do all the peering. So right now we do peering where we need to. but most of our stuff goes out over, we have multiple, obviously different transit providers in each market. And, it's a little bit easier.
Right. Or if the CDN was a core in-house, product, then, it'd be different. So people don't yell at you to stop playing with the routers anymore.
Correct. Yeah, I am not in the routers too much anymore. It's pretty unusual. I'm in there, which everyone will probably tell you is a good thing. But I definitely can get in there, and I know enough to be dangerous still. But all the latest, MPLS automation stuff is people better than me are handling that now.
I've got to go down. So I'm going to ITW in a few weeks, and then I probably won't get to Peering Forum after that. But I threw in a couple Aristas, and it's time to get the 20-year-old Cat 2, SUP 723BXL out of there with filtered /24s. So I don't have to break anything. That is not our production network. That is our lab network, by the way. They do not. It's not they don't let me use the production network, but they're really, again, there's no need for me to be on our production network. It's automated push, everything. There's no, CLI is only for super debug. So
I don't know if you can see the shock in my face for you to even say you still have a SUP 720 running, but that is impressive, sir.
Up 5 years. No, it works okay. I mean, then again, the Aristas I'm doing, they have something called selective advertisement. So basically a route map between the fib and the rib. So we have a bunch of customers that use that. So I'm looking forward to playing with some performance based and selective advertisements for people that want to use, especially given the equipment shortages, older stuff as edge devices. That's a specialty that they've had for some time. So yeah. I mean, that's what we've in my days, I've definitely done that on multiple platforms. Having to kind of see, okay, we're running out of fib space. We got to start limiting a few things. Yeah.
Especially these days with again, we don't have anything in our core that obviously we need that, but there's definitely devices out there that can't, the amount of routes out there now is insane. Everyone's had to find every 24 they can find under every carpet. And, the number of routes is just, every time I see it, it's unbelievable.
I don't want to call it a debate, but maybe a real talk on V4 versus V6 at some point. I'll invite you on and we can talk about that. I have been surprised that the routing table hasn't blown up more, until there's someone major that says I'm only going to be reachable by V6 or, eyeballs or content. We're just going to continue to live in this dual home world, which, seems like it's going to continue for some time. So,
I think that would be a great show. And I don't want to,
we'll do one on automation. We'll do one on that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that would be entertaining. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I don't know anyone that could give anybody a business case to say, turn off V4. Unfortunately, I mean, it would obviously be great, but realistically, we're still, as we've all been saying, we're years and years away from.
It's just topical because the Danog thread about using 240 and reminded me of when I was on the Aaron Advisory Council, IPv8 and Jim Fleming and jumping through a wormhole and peering with Uranus and it's like I don't know, but yeah, problems. So what is new and emerging and hot and interesting as you think about the next few years? What are you looking forward to see coming down the road on the networking and the tech side and the business side also?
Yeah, I mean, networking and tech, there's a lot of cool stuff coming out networking wise, especially on the on the optical side. There's a couple new things that'll make it a little bit easier to do what we do on kind of what they've branded DCI, data center interconnect. As you can imagine, we have a lot of circuits between data centers and between.
Is this like robots or glimmer glass and electronic tunable prisms, or what is it?
No, I mean just the integration between platforms. I think will be a lot easier, and also the platforms themselves. There's all these kind of, I don't want to get too far into the optical side. There's all different systems that should work together, that sort of work together, but don't really work together. Between all the major vendors. It'd be nice if that worked together, worked better. And there's a couple of proposals out there and things that seem to be happening that will make that a lot easier, which would be nice. And you can just kind of, right now, most systems, if you want like a 10 gig and a 1 gig and a, 40 gig and 100 gig, it's not that easy just to plug all those things in the same box. And there's some new stuff coming out that's going to make that a lot easier. hopefully. So we'll see when that comes out. I mean, you got still a couple of years out. That'll be nice. If we can, that way we can just plug in a 10 gig and 100 gig and a 40 gig for a customer, and we don't have to have a different type of card, different everything.
So you're using more, not things that are not just passive prisms, muxes.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So almost all the stuff we do now is active, carrier grade optical gear. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that stuff is kind of split up into 100 gig.
I see. So that's more fixed, because on the routers and switches, they don't really care, and the passive stuff doesn't care that much.
Yeah, there are some changes on the passive side, just the sizes of channels for stuff. The traditional stuff is all the 100 gigahertz band. Obviously, there's people that are much more expert than me at the stuff that would be happy to chat about it. But there's some changes coming there where there'll be a little bit more. I've always liked the idea of I guess what you call alien wavelengths, or buying, a spectrum instead of waves. And some of the stuff I think will be enabling that a lot more as long as the carriers go along with it. And that way you can have less things to break in between everybody, which makes things more reliable. Less cards, especially right now, would be easier.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, on the network side, I mean, I'm excited. As time goes on, more people kind of get into the more of the, I guess what I call SDN. That more of that becomes reality, which is great. When it's working, when it's stable, it's awesome. As most things, when it breaks, it can be a little bit harder to troubleshoot. So I'm hoping that gets a little bit better as well.
I don't know who originally said it, but it was Russ White who quoted it to me. He said, "Automation does not mean simplicity." I mean, it can be simple to consume, but when it breaks, it's tough. What about hype? I have my list, but what do you see that you just sort of groan and you go, oh, architecture?
I groaned a lot about, I guess I get more like, what's the what are they calling SDN, SD-WAN type stuff. I complained about that for a while, but I think it's getting to the point where it's pretty cool and working, now that the underlying network can support it more. So I would normally groan about some of the SDN stuff going on there. I'm sorry, not SDN, but SD-WAN. I know it says 5 different names depending on who you're talking to about it.
Sassy now, it's.
Yep. I mean, it is, it is useful in the right spot now. I don't know. There's a lot. There's a lot going on.
It's just always tough for me to figure out, like, what's a box, what's a service. Well, like, it's all cloud provision. Okay. But like, who runs a backbone, who doesn't, what requires, like, what is basically like a mushroom multi-homing box versus whatever. And so, obviously with Kentech, we get to see all our customers across the customer base. We have some of everything, and we bias towards the things that have great telemetry, especially if they can peek into the performance side. But, we'll work with anything that isn't closed, but we still see a lot of confusion on the customer side about what is the actual difference. And you have to go talk to actual people, because the marketing talks about value as it does in enterprise. It talks about value and problem solved, and not really the technology. So it can be hard.
Yeah, I mean, what happens? They go out there to these offices that have, let's just say on the SD-WAN side, they go out to offices that have, they have a gig circuit from AT&T, a gig circuit from Verizon, both private MPLS that cost $5,000 each. And they say, hey, you just got you get a 1 gig from AT&T and a 1 gig internet from both these guys. And your mind goes first to, okay, how's that going to work? Is it going to be, or is the MTU going to be too small? How's the performance? How's it going to fail over?
They make it magic. Cloud
and it just works.
Yeah.
And what, I guess what I didn't think about some of the stuff, is now that the you can do it now. Not it's not the way it was. I think with the encoding and the way they can, there's enough CPU now in these boxes to shove it all through and for it to work properly. There were definitely some limitations when it first came out, and we would run into them pretty hard. But these days, it's kind of cool, and I think it's neat. Especially, there's been this round of pretty major price drops in kind of the corporate and business internet circuits from the major players these days. So you can get internet in a lot of buildings now for not what you can get it for at home, but close, and it makes that make a lot of sense, especially with all these offices that are mostly empty these days. So it's a nice cost savings option, and it makes it easier to manage as well. So something that I've been kind of excited.
And I think it's definitely a practical application of automation, just as number one SDN thing is probably VMware. So it's deployed, works pretty well, but it's not trying to do anything super complicated.
Yeah. It took them a lot of tries. I mean, it took them a lot of tries to get it working right with VXLAN and all the, all the networking. And I'm sure, I mean, they've had many versions of their SDN on the horizon, but yeah, I mean, these days it does work quite well. We do a fair amount of it as well.
Yeah. It's just, Google started the idea of program everything. And just like with streaming telemetry and just like with automation, it can be easy to read the marketing and think that everybody is fully automated, no network people anywhere. The network self-heals, everything is self-driving or closed loop or whatever. And in reality, what you're talking about, life cycle, some of the SD-WAN stuff, some of the in the data center stuff, that's where, we see the real automation. And you still need people who are involved in design and setting it up and designing it with observability in mind. And life is better, but still work to do, which to me, that's exciting.
Because I mean, if that stuff, you pop that box in all these places and it shoots back to places like you guys to make sure the performance is there, everybody's happy. I mean, there's a lot of cool. Another cool thing I've been monitoring is, on the hardware side, on the server side for us and server deployments. So we do a fair amount of medium size, server deployments for our customers. That like to build these. I guess what we call large private clouds. To either, a lot of our customers, they basically kind of run their steady state load
to hundreds of machines.
Yeah. So they run kind of their steady state load in the data center. And they put the burst stuff all in the clouds, which is absolutely a great way to do it. The challenge, some of that stuff is always kind of the deployment, management, monitoring of all those hardware boxes. There's lots of solutions out there that are good, but there's nothing that's great. And what's happened recently is, some of these hardware-based solutions, there's now some PCI cards you can pop into those machines that handle a lot of the security and deployment and monitoring and backend stuff. It's the same type of stuff that's in AWS and Azure. The way they do it, they've done. Obviously, you guys, I'm sure you've seen the presentations on them, but they have the cards that handle all the encryption, security, storage. It's just a PCI card that pops in the server. Having that available to the rest of us, I think is going to be pretty cool in the coming years.
Does that add to the complexity of the system that there's abstraction from the computer perspective? Does it make it harder to debug, or does it make it more efficient, or does it actually make it easier, to design and operate?
I mean, I would hope in the end it makes it easier. Right now it's a new thing, a new layer, a new system, another platform you've got to deal with, but it does replace enough other platforms. So I think it can make it easier long term.
Okay. I've been following it too, and we definitely have a few customers. Even among our big CDN customers, most of them don't use SmartNICs, but there's definitely a lot of chatter about disaggregating, aggregating, hyperconverging versus disaggregating as an architecture. And for us, we get pitched, and it's like, computers are pretty damn fast nowadays. And again, we're a SaaS company. We're not, we have big data on the back end, but Ethernet's fine for that, and we try to. Do the compute on the near the storage at least. So if not on, so what about it?
You're making me think about something. I mean, so what we've got two customers now doing some pretty innovative GPU stuff, which is always entertaining. For us, for me, stuff. No, just okay. High end, just racks full of GPUs that are power draws in the in the ridiculous numbers. We got servers, doing 8 kW each, which is kind of entertaining.
Wait. A server doing 8 kW each. So you're doing immersive cooling? Like, what's your maximum density for those cabinets?
That's a good question. I think we definitely have a couple in the 40s that are still doing air, but they, we're probably limited. I think around 40 is, without, then we can put the backs on the cabinet, so the water cooling is the easiest to kind of handle that. That way you just kind of cool the rack as the air comes out. They're loud. I'm not going to lie. I mean, there's some turbo fans going on in there. These are all mostly commercially available servers. You can get out there with it, put a bunch of those new A100, whatever their GPUs are in there. But you get these boxes that have, I think, 8 of those, and they're up there. They're cranking the power. But what I was getting at, though, the cool thing that a lot of people are doing now, we have another one of those guys is testing something right now that kind of disaggregates all that stuff. So they're disaggregating the GPUs from the storage, from the RAM even. So you can basically go and allocate, this GPU and this much RAM and this much storage all over, some, it's probably InfiniBand or something, some funky network that's super fast. But that's actually really interesting to quite a few of our customers. So I'm excited to see that stuff working.
Yeah, I've seen the people have been talking about it for a long time, but our peers are more SaaS companies. We don't see them using it. The InfiniBand, there's been this promise of InfiniBand switching, not SAN per se, but all oriented at this disaggregation and virtual computers and stuff. And I guess you could put GPUs on it, but one of the issues with GPUs is always how do you get enough data in fast enough? So
yeah.
It's another area I look forward to learning more about. It's cool to see the innovation. What about Edge? Is that hot hype or both? Are your customers taking advantage?
So, done right, in the right place with the right people with the right location. It depends how far to the edge you're talking about. So I will tell you that I think there's plenty of applications that can take advantage of edges in metro areas. Similar, following a pretty standard CDN deployment.
Yeah.
I don't think going past that makes any sense anytime soon. Let's talk about 5G for a minute. 5G is supposed to take the internet from being at one data center in each city, or one data center in another city. That internet edge moving from that data center, that core, almost out to the tower. I don't know if there's a huge amount of apps and stuff and use for that at this point.
Today.
This could be this obviously will be another call, and this is one of those things where I'd look back at this video in 5 years and be, man, I was an idiot. But I mean, right now I can't think of a ton of apps that would make a huge difference being computed at, that would take care of that, that last millisecond or two.
Yeah, but even
Metaverse
there,
is one.
Having 10,000 cities and 200 places per city is something that would be hard to coordinate even for our most sophisticated customers. But yeah, we'll see. We'll definitely see where that goes. The good part about that is cloud native architecture, being able to deploy at one. It's the coordination and telemetry and management and monitoring and state that's hard.
That's there.
At least we've got the other stuff, which is running it in a standard way. It's just OpenStack and OVFs and all the ways that people were OVAs, OVFs, whatever. You could package up a VM, but how do you turn it on, turn it off, hook it to stuff? Kubernetes is a massively complex beast, but at least with cloud native Kubernetes, whether it's one location or 400 locations in a place, we're starting to have a lingua franca there, which I think will be beneficial, whether it's just someone running, auth stuff in their network at the edge, or eventually letting people deploy third-party stuff, out near the tower. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, you can see. I mean, the one thing that's been doing better is kind of the cloud gaming. Cloud gaming. I'm not saying there's a huge amount of adoption, but that's something that's been working better, right? With the advent of a lot of people in these big metro areas having fiber to their home, and they are a couple milliseconds away from these data centers now. And that's starting to work. But I don't know if that scale is ever going to make sense to install servers compute for that in the middle of.
It's like IPv6, I think. And again, I don't want to imply that I'm down on an edge and where things are going. Again, it's driving architecture in a great way. But when IPv6 was initially sold, it was, it gives you security you don't get with IPv4. It gives you routing scalability you don't get with IPv4. It gives you QoS. None of those were true. And so people were like, well, what's going on here? And I think some of the first applications were like, self-driving cars need it. It's like, well, not really, but maybe something does. And again, I look at it.
I'm not going in it.
I was like Ready Player One, or, and now we've got Meta, right? If we really wanted to do that, again, hard computer science problem still to solve, but, we will see.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, backing up into what will take advantage of it. I think some people right now are deploying code. Like right now, what percent of sites are really optimized for edge at all right now, right? Most sites there's still some database somewhere in some city that you're waiting for that database to confirm something before it comes back to you, no matter what it is.
And there's a lot of cool companies. Edge ML is a case because, people are trying to build very lightweight, composable, meaning that you can do the work distributed and add it up. And then, you got some stuff where power is cheap at the edge and more clean. So there are some applications where maybe you don't need it, but maybe it's better for the planet to run it distributed.
Yeah.
There again, lots of to me, it's awesome that things are changing because, who wants to get bored? Creates a lot of opportunities to, start and run companies.
Yeah, just application wise, like, I mean, right now people need to take advantage of what's even available at the moment, right? Like, we've got, great people, Fly.io, for example, they're one of the people that are enabling a lot of people to do kind of stuff on the edge without doing too much work on the application, but like allowing that stuff to work and these new data, like CockroachDB, for example, like there's a lot of technology out there that people are just starting to adopt now that allows you to do kind of creative stuff and, localized database that'll work on the edge. And that stuff is pretty cool. And I think just using that's all available today, right? Like today you can go from being in one data center, two data centers, like a primary NDR, to actually having much better application performance at the edge. Yeah. Which, with the advent today of everyone being on mobile all day, it does make a big difference.
Yeah.
And just getting in the right city is half the battle, I think. The last where I will argue is, going from, Chicago, for example, like being at one, 5 miles away, does it really matter if it's in 350 Cermak or if it's, 10 miles closer to me? That's going to be a hard argument to win at the moment.
Right. Or it's just, how would you be the management challenge of 50 per city versus just having 50 cities or 2 times 50 cities, So speaking about what else is cool, you're in Chicago. And I assume you're a promoter for your fair city. Any restaurant recommendations for people that come to town?
Ooh, that's a great question.
Let's start with, what's your favorite place in Greektown?
I'm a traditionalist in Greektown. I mean, I really like the Greek Isles, just because it's big. It's been there forever. They're very reliable, and I really appreciate a place you can go to and it's going to be good every time. A lot of stuff has changed, with COVID. We lost a lot of great restaurants. A lot of things have. I
wonder if my meat sommelier is still there at Fogo.
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, Chicago being, the very blue city we are, it's like we're definitely just kind of getting going now, right? Like, I was just telling you, I've only been out to a couple restaurants here in the last few months. Me having a couple of small kids doesn't help the situation.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to get back out on the town, to tell you the truth. So I think I have to do a retasting. Basically, I think I need to go back out to all my favorites and try some new ones. Because I don't think I have a great answer for that question yet.
I don't even know if Q is still there. We need to check. Well, for any listeners that are into science fiction, the World Science Fiction Convention is in Chicago this year, September, I think, 1st to the 5th. And we will be sampling food for any science fiction or network nerds that come to town then.
Come join us.
Yeah. So how can people find you, Jordan, and Deft?
Thanks. Jordan at Deft.com.
Okay.
That's the easiest.
Okay. Well, I am Avi Freedman. I am Avi Freedman on Twitter and LinkedIn, and Avi at Kentik.com, and Kentik is Kentik. And Jordan is Jordan at Deft.com. And thanks everybody for joining for this episode of Network AF. And maybe we'll have a network community dinner when WorldCon is on this summer.
Yeah, thanks everyone.